After working as a CPA and financial coach within the finance industry for several years and working with a variety of different clients, I've discovered a lot of negative financial behaviors that are really holding people back. In this video, I want to go over the top 10 that I've come across and what you can do to prevent from falling victim to them and how to overcome them so that you can put yourself on a much better financial success trajectory. If you implement even just some of these, you'll be on a much better path forward than where you are now. So the first one is not having a direction or not knowing where you're trying to go. See, first things first, we have to understand where it is we're trying to get to come up with a plan to get there. But if we don't know where we're going, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. Unfortunately, most folks are just meandering and in survival mode. And the sad part is they might not even know that it's happening to them. Most people just live in the moment, and they consider if they're doing all right financially purely based on whether they can afford the current lifestyle that they have. Their financial health metric is just, can I pay my bills on time, and do I have enough for some fun? And if the answer is yes, they think that they're doing all right. This unfortunately creates a very passive money management style. See, the benchmark of paying bills and having some extra left over for fun is the absolute bare minimum. In order to switch from passive to proactive, you need to do some thinking and start to envision where you want to be in the next few years. And from that, then you create smart goals that build up towards those larger objectives. This serves as a roadmap that gives you a direction to move towards. So if you feel like you fit in that category, do this. Think about what you want or where you want to be in the next 2 to 3 years. Then do some research and try to put a number, an amount that you think this goal would cost. Then calculate how much you would need to set aside each month to hit your goal by the time frame you set for yourself. The next negative behavior I've discovered is extremely common, which is paying yourself last. Most people get their paycheck and they pay their bills. They pay rent, their phone bills, subscriptions, and then what's left, or I should say in second priority, is spending on immediate wants. So spending it on fun, on entertainment. And if there's anything left over, then they save. The problem here is that more often than not, we end up spending all of the money after bills on wants, right? Things that we don't really need. Financially savvy people do the complete opposite. They pay themselves first. And what that means is they make sure that their main goals that are going to be moving them forward in life are taken care of before their immediate wants. In essence, you're practicing delayed gratification so that the important things are actually getting done. And the more trivial things, if they happen, great. But if they don't, it's fine. You know that you and your future self are being taken care of. Financially savvy people, the minute they get paid, attack their goals head on. First, you have to have goals, but once you have those goals, they make sure those are top priority, not an afterthought. After having done the exercise from the first behavior I talked about and having come up with your goals and a number as to how much they'll cost and by when you aspire to achieve them, now you have something to work with. If you recall from the first behavior, you broke it down at a monthly level. So now going forward, once you get paid, immediately divvy that up amongst the goals that you've set for yourself to ensure that you're using your money wisely, taking care of what's important. And then, of course, use judgment when allocating your money between goals and bills, and only leave the remainder for your wants and for fun. Now, a discovery you might come across is that you might not be able to balance both goals and bills. And this is not a negative thing. This is a positive thing because it's discovery that you wouldn't have been able to have otherwise, which is perhaps your bills are too high, in which case it's probably a good time to evaluate whether there's some saving there that you could do. Maybe there's some bills that you really shouldn't be paying, or you can reduce your bills. Or if your bills are already as lean as they can be, then maybe your goals are too ambitious based on your current income. You might need to adjust your timelines, right? And again, that's not a negative thing. This is the beauty of being proactive and strategic. Now you can do something about it, right? You'll have a better idea as to a realistic time frame to achieve those goals. And you could do things like maybe save more wherever possible, or increase your income, right? Whether that be look for a promotion, look for a new job, start a side hustle, generate different streams of income. The options vary, but the realization that something has to change is extremely empowering, because this is something that you wouldn't have been able to discover unless you did these exercises. And by the time you come to this realization, it might be too late, or you might have lost many years of progress you could have taken advantage of. Another financial behavior that is an absolute destroyer of financial progress and growth is the incorrect use of debt. And this can take many forms, but unfortunately, we've gotten so accustomed to using debt in the wrong way and taking on what's called bad debt. And bad debt is essentially any debt that is not going to give you some sort of financial return. And this is exacerbated by the fact that nowadays, through credit card companies pushing the latest and greatest credit cards and credit products with all their perks and rewards, we are pushed to use things like credit cards for absolutely everything, even for things that we don't need. And even though that might not be intrinsically bad, if not handled with care, it can completely take on a life of its own and be an anchor for our financial growth. So nowadays, everybody uses debt for everything, from their groceries to buying gifts to paying for gas, you name it. In theory, as long as you can pay off that credit card bill by the end of the month, then you wouldn't be taking on any interest and you could reap the rewards that the credit card company might provide you. But the reality is, most people swipe their card for all of these things I mentioned and are not able to pay the full balance at the end of the month. And that starts to accumulate over time. And before you know it, now you have this huge debt that is accumulating interest at very high rates. And that's an absolute destroyer of any potential growth that you might have. So the rule is pretty simple. If you can't afford it with your own money, then it's extremely risky and irresponsible to buy something with other people's money, which in this case is credit card debt. That safeguard could save you from huge amounts of money that are spent or practically given away in interest expense. And that money could be used again instead for contributing to your goals and for investments. So if this is you, I recommend stop using your credit cards for absolutely everything. Forget about the incentives and rewards, because in most cases where somebody is dealing with high credit card debt, the damage you're incurring is much larger than any benefit from any perks or incentives or rewards. So going forward, unless you can ensure that you can pay off the balance at the end of the month, then credit cards should not be used. Only until down the road you have the right financial setup and you're in a much more stable and solid place, then where you can afford to pay off the bill at the end of the month, then you should consider maybe using a credit card that might give you some benefits. But for the time being, the cost definitely outweighs any pros. Another financial behavior that is all too common is not having an emergency fund. So as I alluded to earlier in the video, a lot of people base their financial health simply on whether they can pay their current bills on a monthly basis. So as long as I can cover my essential expenses, anything else is a plus. So if I can spend some money on some fun, then I'm at a surplus, I'm actually doing great. The reality is that you don't want to rely on just the income you make on a month-to-month basis to cover all your bills, because there's no guarantee that you're going to be employed for the foreseeable future. That's just the honest truth. So if you're depending on a bill coming in every month, then the risk that you're taking is huge, because if you were to lose that job without any sort of emergency fund or cushion, then you're pretty much now having to scramble and see where you can somehow pay for your bills, given that now you don't have any income coming in. In addition, even if you do have your job, there are oftentimes sudden expenses that come up that you hadn't factored in your monthly budget that come up. So even though right now, based on your income, you're able to cover all of your essential expected bills, if a random sudden bill comes up, for example, if your car breaks down, maybe a pet bill, things of that nature, and you hadn't factored that in, you might be in the red. You might not have enough money from your monthly paycheck to cover that bill. And similarly, you're having to scramble to find how you're going to pay the bill. And as we know about emergencies, they don't wait. So when these things happen, you usually need to be able to pay for whatever cost that might be pretty urgently. The stress of having to find where to pay for a certain bill is going to cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of burden for you. The recommendation is to start small. You don't have to go too aggressively, but I would put this as a very high priority, if not your first priority. Start saving at least $1,000 for the random unexpected bill, such as car maintenance or car repair or a pet bill. From there, you start increasing to about a month's worth of essential bills. So if you know that your essential bills are about $2,500 or $3,000, then you should aim to increase your emergency fund. Ideally, an emergency fund is anywhere between 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, depending on a few factors. But for the purposes of this video, if you don't have an emergency fund at all, the recommendation would be to first start with 1,000. And once you hit 1,000, then you can grow to about a month's worth of essential expenses. Finally, the other financial behavior we'll talk about is not having a clear idea of your income and expenses. I talked about in the emergency fund item how in order to calculate your emergency fund, you have to have a very clear idea of what your essential expenses are on a monthly basis. If you don't have that, it's hard for you to know how at risk you are of not being able to take on an emergency expense. What you need to do is look at your past 3 months of statements and determine your essentials and non-essentials and come up with a 3-month average. So now you'll know how much you're spending on what, and you'll have it categorized by essential and non-essential. And now you can start to optimize by knowing exactly what percentage of your money is going to your non-essentials versus your essentials. When it comes to saving, we want to reduce our non-essentials the most possible. And if there's any room in the essentials, we also want to explore that. But for the purposes of an emergency fund, you can also leverage that new knowledge that you've obtained by determining if, again, as I said previously, if your essential expenses are $2,500, after you've tried to reduce by as much as you can, let's say you're able to knock out a bill that you really don't need anymore, that was $200, so now you're at $2,300. So that 1 month's worth of emergency fund is $2,300. So that's something that you can shoot for to set aside. But again, none of this would be able to happen if you don't have a clear idea as to where you stand right now in terms of your spending. Having that is key so you can start to optimize and make use of the most money possible from the money that you make to start contributing towards the things that actually matter. One is security, and two are the goals that you have set aside or will set aside for yourself. So this is the first batch of these negative behaviors that we'll talk about for this video. We'll talk about some others in a subsequent video, but it's important to understand that these changes don't happen overnight. But even coming to the realization that you might be falling victim to some of these is extremely important and empowering. That's the first step for you to be able to change, is to realize and acknowledge where you might be so that you can do something about it. Progress doesn't have to be extremely aggressive or burdensome. The goal is to come to the realization and start making immediate, reasonable, and manageable steps to overcome these. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to get unstuck and get on a better plane than where you were before.